let's talk about all the books that I read last month. First, I need a beverage because we need to get cozy. So if you want one, go grab one now. This is your sign to grab a nice little cozy beverage. Let's see if I can do this on the first try. Nope. Oh, got it. Hopefully that was satisfying to hear. Okay, I got my cozy blanket, I got my beverage, and I got all the books that we're going to talk about that I read last month. I'm also going to throw in the one book that I read in December because I didn't do a wrap up because I literally read one book and it was an audiobook. So as you could tell, I was in a slump, and you'll see at the beginning of January I was also still in that reading slump, but we slowly got out of it. And let's get cozy and chat. Like kind of burns going down, but like in a good way. So in December, I listened to my one audiobook, and it was The Boyfriend by Freida McFadden. I was going in a little bit of a Freida McFadden kick last year. I still haven't read The Housemaid. That's on my TBR for this year. It's just like not on Libby as an audiobook for some reason. That's a whole nother tangent, but that's why I haven't listened to it or read it yet. But I did listen to The Boyfriend, like I said. This one bothered me in ways that I really can't describe too much without giving spoilers. It was just the main character, Sydney, literally made me want to rip my hair out. She was so annoying, and like I get that like the main character, especially in thrillers or mysteries, like kind of has to be a little bit clueless sometimes to like not spoil everything or to like have a mystery, but she was literally clueless. Like every single red flag that was coming up, she just completely ignored and then acted so surprised when like something crazy happened, and like it was there, the signs were there, and she just made me so annoyed. There were so many things I'm like, girl, are you even here with us? Because like any normal person would be like, okay, this is suspicious, this is weird. No, she walked straight on towards the red flags, kept going, and then was shocked when things went down, and I'm like, it just bothered me. It was entertaining though, I will say. I feel like Freida always does like two plot twists where like usually there's like a big one and then there's like another twist like right at the end, and I never see usually either of them coming, but especially this one I was like, okay, now what? Like I always like get the plot twist at the end and then I'm like, oh. So Sydney literally has the worst luck in Boyfriend. She keeps like having these terrible dates or these terrible encounters happen to her, which brings me to the topic of her being literally so clueless and red flags and anything else. And then she finally starts dating this nice man, and then things start happening around the town where she lives. A girl is murdered and she's just kind of getting some weird vibes, and she kind of gets tangled up in this whole thing. Also, it's a past and present timeline, so you get the past timeline of a guy named Tom, and then the present is in Sydney's point of view, so you kind of learn like how these two timelines and people like intersect in the future, and you kind of like see the buildup of what you think is happening, and then of course Freida's like, no, just kidding, like what you think is absolutely not the truth, and then she ends up completely shocking you, which always happens to me, but it's a good thing because I love when thrillers can shock me. I always love listening to Freida's books. However, like I said, Sydney just really bothered me and I could not get past it, so I ended up giving this one 3 stars. I thought it was entertaining, the mystery was really good, it's just I couldn't get past the main character being so annoying. Then I finally read my first physical copybook of the year, which was Finale. I had started this in December of 2024 and did not finish it till like mid-January. So like I said, I was in a reading slump. This one didn't unfortunately help with that, just because I was already like kind of turned off from the Caraval series because I didn't like the second book, Legendary, that much. But this one, I will say, redeemed it a little bit for me. I liked how we had 2 POVs in this book, and we had like some of the original romance that was in the first book, which I was missing in the second book. So I really liked that. I loved how everything like came together in this book. Like even from the first book, you could see how it led to events that happened in this book. And I really did enjoy it. It just wasn't my favorite. I don't know. I didn't really love the Caraval series. Like it's a good trilogy. And then unfortunately it just went downhill from the first book that I gave 5 stars to, but I did end up giving this 3 stars. It was good. It was a nice like wrap up of the trilogy. However, nothing compared to the first book to me, just personally. I know some people like the second book. They like the romance in the second book. I just didn't. But I still recommend the Caraval trilogy. I think it's really interesting. The magic is so interesting. I love Scarlett and Donatella, the sisters, so much. Like they really show the true love of sisters to me. I do think you should try it out if you haven't read it yet, and I'm excited to move into the Once Upon a Broken Heart trilogy next because there's a character from this series that's in that series, so that's why I read this one first. But so if you're unaware of the Caraval trilogy, it is about a magical competition that happens every so often where you can go and compete, and then the winner gets like a special prize from this magical person legend. And Scarlett and Donatella are sisters, and they kind of in like a dark predicament with where they live and their family. So Scarlett has been writing to Legend for years, trying to secure an invitation for her and her sister to Caraval to hopefully go and win the competition and change their lives. And one day, right before Scarlett is about to be married off, she finally gets a letter back from Legend, and he invites her and Donatella and her fiance to Caraval, and then everything kind of transpires from there. You watch everything happen. There's romance, there's like competition, there's mystery even, there's magic. It's so interesting, and I really liked the first book, like I said, so I do think it's a great book and a great series to read, especially as a beginner fantasy. I didn't feel that it was like too hard to get into. Okay, that was enough yapping about that first book. Oh my gosh. Then I read my first 5-star book of the year, which it was so quick to happen to me, which I was not expecting at all, but it was Little Women. This is my first ever classic, literally ever. I think, actually, scratch that. I did read To Kill a Mockingbird, which I believe is a classic in middle school or high school. Like, this is the first, like, real classic that I've read on my own choice, and of my own will, just to read this on a nice, like, snowy day in January. So I'm glad that I finally read a classic. This has been on my TBR since last year, and last year one of my goals was to read a classic, and I didn't do it. I just kept putting it off, but this year I was like, no, I'm determined to read this classic, and I did, and I absolutely fell in love with it. Like, even though I only read this a few weeks ago, I know this is a book that's going to stay with me for like the rest of my life. I'm gonna want my kids to read it. I'm gonna have them watch the movie. I'm gonna rewatch the movie probably every year, reread the book, like go in and highlight again. It's about 4 sisters, and their father is away at war and their mother is home with them, and they're kind of like going through this time of living in poverty after they have like been well off, and now they're trying to navigate life without their dad there as well. And you pretty much just watch them going through life, and you watch them learn lessons, and their mom helps them with advice, and you just watch their like trials and tribulations and their ups and downs, and you just kind of like get to know these characters. It's very much a character heavy story, but it's filled with so many lessons and messages and just so many wholesome things that I like learned coming out of this book. And then also, like, as a romance girly, there is a little bit of a romance. I will say, after watching the movie, I prefer the movie romance better than the book. I just feel like it's not as prevalent, but in the movie it is really good if you care for the romance part of it. But I'm so glad that I finally read it, and I think it's a book that everybody should read at least once in their lives. I kind of forgot that I even listened to this book because I didn't really like it that much, but it was Pretty Girls by Karen Slaughter. I've heard about this book before. I heard it was like a really dark thriller, which I should have just like known by that, like what it was gonna become, I guess, or like seen the signs or something, but I didn't. And I listened to this and I was shocked. I was so like grossed out. It was so heavy. If you don't like really heavy dark thrillers, I would not recommend this at all, because it is heavy on your heart, and it is sad, and it is way too much detail for me personally. I kept listening to it. I didn't DNF it just because of the fact of the mystery. Like, I wanted to figure it out, but like it was really dark and sad. But then I felt like the mystery wasn't even that good. Like, there wasn't really a big plot twist. There was a plot twist at the beginning, and I thought that was interesting, and I was like, okay, here we go, like we're already getting into it. And then it just kind of disappointed me after that and fell flat, and I didn't like it. And I ended up giving it 2 stars. I guess the only thing that I actually liked about this book was that there was 2 sisters, and like, again, I love reading about sisters, so their bond, like, I really enjoyed watching. And like, they kind of had like a falling out in their childhood because their sister went missing and it hasn't been found, and then ever since then they've kind of just had like a wedge in between them, and as they grew up, they grew apart and just stopped talking completely. My battery! OMG. Okay, somehow my battery died. I don't know if that's a sign that I've been yapping too long already, or if just like it got overheated and died quicker. I don't know. I guess we'll find out depending on how long this battery lasts. But I think I was talking about Pretty Girls and the plot. So like I said, 2 sisters had a falling out, and then as they're older, Claire's husband is killed right in front of her during a mugging situation, and then Claire starts finding some things out about her husband, which she's not sure if he's involved in or not, but she finds it like on his computer. So that kind of catapults the sisters back together to try to figure out what is going on. And I did like the sister aspect, like I said. I just did not care for the mystery at all, and it's just so dark and disturbing and detailed. So please, if you're gonna read this, look up the trigger warnings, because like I said, it's very dark. Okay, 2 stars for that one. I'm gonna move on now. So by this point, I'm slowly getting out of my reading slump. I still haven't read that many physical copies after Little Women. I was just like, okay. I kind of took a break again from reading, and then towards the end of the month, I was like, wait, Onyx Storm is about to come out. I need to reread Fourth Wing and Iron Flame. So that's what I did, and this completely got me out of my book slump and had me falling straight back into love with reading. So first I did reread Fourth Wing. This is the first time I've ever reread the book actually, and it was such a pleasant experience. I wasn't sure if I was going to love it as much as I loved the first time I read this book. The first time I read it, I gave it 5 stars, and I will go ahead and say that the second time I read it, I also gave it 5 stars. It was just amazing and gave me that same feeling that I had the first time I was reading the book. And then since I had already read Iron Flame by this point of my rereading Fourth Wing, I was looking out for more things and I was noticing new things, which is always so fun when you reread a book and you like notice something you didn't read the first time through. And that was just me during this whole reread. I was just having fun. I was giggling. I was underlining. I was like, oh my gosh, I have new theories. I was like seeing new and different things and new eyes. It was a wonderful experience. And if you haven't read Fourth Wing, I definitely think you should. I'm sure you've seen it or heard about it at this point, but it is so good. It's an easy fantasy. There's not a ton of world building in the first book, and there's romance, there's found family, there's friendships, there's dragons, there's all kinds of things. So I gave it 5 stars again on the reread, and I'll probably always give it 5 stars. It's always going to be a 5-star book in my heart to me. Then I also reread Iron Flame, which the first time through, I think I gave it 4 stars, and I ended up giving it 4 stars again on the second read through. I actually listened to the dramatic, is it dramatic? I think it's graphic, the graphic audio on Libby. It's basically just a whole production in your ears. Basically, I'm pretty sure that's how they even describe it at the beginning of the audiobook. Or it's a movie in your ears. Movie in your ears, because it has sound effects, it has music, it literally has like background noises. So at the beginning, like Violet is sitting in a cafeteria-ish kind of thing and talking to her friends, and you can hear like people talking in the background, like, and at first it was a little bit overwhelming. I did not expect to have like so much going on. It's a little overstimulating, all the different noises, but I quickly got used to it and actually really enjoyed it. I loved hearing like the dragon noises and like the fighting sounds, like you can hear like swords hitting, and it was really cool. It definitely helped me visualize it a lot more than just reading it did. And also, I wasn't like the biggest fan of Iron Flame the first time I read it. It just was like kind of hard to get through. Like the first like 50% I would say is very slow in a way, and then it gets crazy at the end. It picks up really quick. So I just knew if I read it with my eyes, it'd be very slow for me, and I was trying to finish it quickly so I could then move on to Onyx Storm, because by this point, like, this was almost out. But like I said with Fourth Wing, I noticed a lot of different things this time through that I read it, and I actually enjoyed it, I would say, even a little bit more with the reread, just because the first time I read it, it was slow to me, and I was just like so anticipating it that I wanted to get to the end and just know what happened. But the second time I wasn't as much in a rush, so I really got to just like listen to it and enjoy it, and I picked up on a lot of new things, which I think is so fun. Then I read Onyx Storm, which was the newest release in the Empyrean series, and I was so pleasantly surprised by this. I wasn't sure if it was going to be like how Iron Flame was, and it was going to be a little bit of a disappointment or a little bit slow, but I didn't think it was slow. I will say that at the beginning, it does jump you straight into things. You're kind of like just jumping straight into a conversation. So if you don't reread Iron Flame, I think you could be a little bit lost and confused at the beginning of this book. I did see some TikToks where people were saying that the whole first 20% they were very confused, but I think if you reread Iron Flame and just like pay attention and just know you're gonna be jumped in and like might be a little bit behind everybody else, like the characters know what's going on, but you're just kind of like thrown in, so it'll slowly start making sense. And I think if you just go in knowing that, it'll be a little bit more of a pleasant experience for you. While I was reading this book, I think I got to like 40 or 30%, and I was like, yeah, this book is eating, like I'm obsessed with it. It's kind of giving me the Fourth Wing 5-star feeling, and I really was happy about it. And then I kept reading and kept falling in love with it. I loved the romance in this, the romance and like everything that our main character says, the guy, so good. Everything. Like I was highlighting so much. And then also I love Riddick so much. He's so hilarious. In this book, he carried us through this book, like most of this book. Like it was so funny. I was laughing anytime he appeared on the page. You also learn so much in this book. Like I think it's necessary world building, and like you learn more about the history and more about the magic, and like you've learned things that like you've been waiting to learn since the first book. And then at the same time, you're still getting like those funny scenes or like the romantic scenes, which is like what I love to read about too. So it was just felt like more like Fourth Wing, the writing for Fourth Wing, I guess. Iron Flame, I did feel like it was a lot of world building and I got a little bit bored, but this one, I didn't feel like that at all. And I had a really great time reading it. I gave it 5 stars. I was obsessed with it all the way from beginning to end. I loved it. It was such like an easy read, especially compared to Iron Flame. Like I said, it took me a while to get through that one the first time. This one I flied through it, and then at the end I tried to slow down. That way I wouldn't like have it be over. I didn't want it to end. So I'm so glad that I read it. And I also filmed an entire reading vlog of me rereading Fourth Wing, Iron Flame, and then reading Onyx Storm for the first time. It is going to be full spoilers just because I have like nowhere else to like give all my thoughts and opinions. And I thought it'd be fun to talk about like theories and everything and all of that fun stuff and all the spoiler fun stuff, because by the time that I post that video, I think I'm posting it next week-ish, I feel like most people will have read Onyx Storm by that point, so look out for that reading vlog. It's going to come to you very soon. Okay, now for the last book that I read in January. I was really picky on the next book that I was going to read after reading Onyx Storm, because since I loved that book so much, I was scared the next book I picked up I wouldn't like, or I wouldn't give it like a fair rating or fair read through, just because I might be like in a hangover from Onyx Storm. And I also didn't want to put myself into a book slump by reading like a book that just like wasn't resonating with me. So I thought my safest option would be reading a sequel to a previous fantasy book that like I already know the world for, I already know the characters. It'd be easy for me to jump into and then not get in a book slump. And I will say that it worked out perfectly. I didn't get in a book slump. I'm even more into reading than I was throughout the entire month. So I ended up reading Two Twisted Crowns, which is the sequel to One Dark Window. I don't remember when exactly I read One Dark Window, but I know it's in a reading vlog, so I'll put it up here if you're interested in hearing my thoughts or just seeing my reactions. But I really did enjoy One Dark Window. It's such a unique magic system and world that I was like obsessed with learning everything about it. And then there's also a romance and a little bit of a mystery. So in the first book, they live in a world where there's a magic through providence cards, and each like providence cards has different magic. So there's one that like you can literally compel people to do whatever you want. You could be like sit down like a dog and wag your tail and they would. And then, I don't know why that came to me first, but it just did. And then there's also like a mirror card, which like makes you invisible. Like there's all these different cards basically. And then there's also a mist, which is like a big thick fog. And if people go into the mist, they can get sick or possess some sort of magic that causes them to degenerate at a certain rate. It's different for everybody, and some people get magic, some people just get sick. So it's very inconsistent. And our main character, Elspeth, gets the curse or the sickness from the mist, but actually instead of getting just fully sick, she possesses magic. And you don't really know what her magic is, but all you know is that she can talk to the nightmare, who is one of the people on the cards, the nightmare card. And he is literally like in her mind, like Venom. If you've ever seen Venom, how Venom can talk to the guy, I don't know his name, but he can like, they can talk to each other in their brains, and like it's like that, like the nightmare is in Elspeth's brain and they can communicate to each other. And then Elspeth is trying to find a cure to cure the mist and cure the degeneration, and also cure herself from having the nightmare in her mind. So she kind of goes on this mission of trying to break the curse and break the mist, and she meets some interesting people along the way. Like I said, there's romance, there's like found family as well. And so then when I moved into the second book, I was a little bit hesitant because sometimes I don't love sequels as much as the first book. I wasn't sure if this book was going to feel like really dragged out or too similar to the first book, just kind of like copy and paste, but I will say it didn't feel like that at all, and I was very pleasantly surprised by how much I loved the sequel. I think the author did an amazing job at writing a sequel. She added like POVs from multiple different characters that we didn't get in the first book, and I think that was the perfect touch because you learn more about the like side characters, I guess, in a way, but you like fall in love with them. And there's also romance in this book that you don't really see coming. At least I didn't at all, but I was so obsessed with it. And you learn even more about the past, and the past that comes to the present. There's parallels between the past and the present. Everything is coming up and you're still on this journey with these characters, and then everything wraps up so nicely and beautifully. And I am so sad to be done with this duology. I loved it so much. It was such an easy read. Sometimes I'd look up from reading this book and I would have read like 100 pages and it didn't feel like I read 100 pages, so that's always a good sign. And I really enjoyed it. I gave this one 4 stars, but I feel like together both of these books, the Shepherd King duology is like a 5-star duology to me. I really loved it, and I think if you're like kind of in a hangover from Onyx Storm or just like any fantasy book, this duology would be perfect for you. It's not too complicated to follow with like the fantasy and magic vibes, and like I said, there's romance, which is always a plus for me. Really enjoyed this, and I also read this in a reading vlog along with Finale in another book that's going to be coming out soon, so look out for that if you want to see like all of my reactions. Those are all the books that I read in January, but I also did have 2 DNFs that I really quickly wanted to talk about. I feel like I never talk about the books I DNF'd till like the end of the year, but I do want to start including them in my wrap-ups of the month that I DNF'd them in. They're also both audiobooks. I feel like I DNF audiobooks quicker than just like a normal book. If I have the physical copy, I'm like more determined to like push through and finish it. But if it's just like on Libby as an audiobook and I don't like it, I'm just like, okay, I'll just return it, and it's like out of sight, out of mind, you know? So the first book that I DNF'd was Wrong Place, Wrong Time. At first, I was liking the concept of this book. It's very interesting. So this couple is at home and they're waiting for their son to get home from like a New Year's Eve party or some sort of party. When he's about to be home, like he's like on their street, this very traumatic event takes place, and then the next day the mother wakes up and it's the same day. Like she wakes up and like the events from last night haven't happened yet, so it's kind of like a Groundhog Day vibe, but then she can end up like going further back in time than just like 24 hours, and she has no idea what's going on. No one's believing her. She's very confused. She's trying to like prevent this traumatic event from happening, but it just started to feel very, very repetitive and confusing, and I didn't really care where the story was starting to go anymore. I was like, okay, I don't even care about the mystery, which is kind of crazy for me. Usually I will stick a book out just to like figure out the mystery, but by this point I was like, I'm bored. I didn't really care for the writing. It felt, like I said, just very repetitive to me. So I did end up DNFing it. I might go back to it one day. I don't know. I might just look up the spoilers. If you liked it, let me know, because then that might encourage me to go back to it and read it again. But I just wasn't obsessed with it, so I was like, I don't care to keep listening to it. And then I just returned it, and so someone else could give it a try, maybe enjoy it more than me. So that was my first DNF. Then I DNF'd The Midnight Feast by Lucy Foley. I don't know why I put a hold on this audiobook on Libby, because I didn't like The Paris Apartment by Lucy Foley. So I don't know what in my mind was like, yeah, let me get this audiobook and listen to it. Maybe I was just trying to give Lucy Foley another shot just because I didn't like one book by her. Doesn't mean I won't like any of her books, but unfortunately it's seeming to be true, because I did start The Midnight Feast and then I got like 2 hours into it and I'm just not hooked. I'm not interested and I'm bored. Also, it's kind of like dark vibe. All I know about this audiobook is there's like a new like manor or some type of like hotel maybe that opened up, and like it's really fancy, like only really rich people can go, and then we get like a POV of one of the bartenders, and he like gives this drink to this girl, and then like she invites him up to her room, and then the guy starts feeling like kind of guilty, and like he finds like these papers of like news articles about the manor and like the girl who opened the manor, and so he just like kind of weirded out, so he just leaves. Then you get the POV from the girl, and like she just feels like very suspicious, very weird. I don't know why she's there, but like I feel like she has like some sort of grudge against the woman who opened the manor. But like I didn't really get much farther than that. I don't really know what's gonna happen after that, but it was kind of giving me like dark, eerie vibes. I have no idea if this is like actually what happens, but it was kind of giving me like Lord of the Flies vibe. I don't know, like something about like the dark eeriness of it was like kind of creeping me out, and I was like, I just don't think this is for me. I was scared it was gonna go like downhill really fast, or like some type of feast was gonna happen that was not food. I don't know, but it was like scaring me, so I just like stopped listening to it. And I could be like completely wrong, it could be just like a normal thriller or whatever, but I was already bored, so I was like, okay, if this does go down like a dark, eerie path, I don't want to listen to it, so I'm just gonna DNF it now. And I just don't think Lucy Foley is for me. Like her writing just doesn't hook me, it doesn't entertain me, which is like something that I need to be able to continue listening to a book. And I think this is just like a me problem. I know some people love Lucy Foley and like love her books and like love the twists and the turns that she has. I just feel like they're not that crazy of a plot twist ever to me. Like with The Paris Apartment, I feel like it took forever to get to anywhere, and it was just really boring. And then when the twist happened, I was like, oh, okay, cool. But I was just happy to be done with it. So I don't know. That's just me. I guess me and Lucy Foley just don't vibe very well. So at least now I know. I don't think I'll ever go back to one of her books, but don't let me completely deter you from them, because you might like them. Some people probably do. It's just, I just don't think they're personally for me. I just talked for so long, but I hope you enjoyed listening to me talking about all the books that I read in January and also didn't read. And let me know what your favorite book that you read in January was. That way maybe I can add it to my TBR for February. And go ahead and subscribe if you want to see more videos from me, more reading vlogs, more wrap-ups. And thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you very, very soon in my next video.